we're excited to have Laura interview Dr. Saylor for us today. And we'll have the interview go on for about 35-40 minutes and then just open it up for questions, but feel free to use the chat to add any questions or comments as we go through the day. And I think we're a little bit smaller group, so I'm happy to introduce the both of you, but if we want to kind of do a round of introductions, would you be open to that as well? Yeah. Do you?
Yeah,
okay.
I can.
That would be great.
Whatever. Yeah, okay. I will start then. I'm Laura Yanikiewski. I'm a third-year PhD student in the developmental science program in psychology and human development department. And I work with Meg Saylor, actually. She is my advisor. So I study active word learning and kind of what I've been starting to call kind of more challenging word learning. So things that are have kind of rich meaning information, like verbs and abstract words and things like that. Yeah, is there something else I should include?
I think that's a great start. Meg, do you want to introduce yourself? Or?
Wow, I'm going to be talking about myself a lot. So
yes.
I will just start by saying I'm happy to be here. I'm Meg Saylor. I'm a professor in the psychology and human development department at Vanderbilt.
Thank you, Meg. Duane, can I ask you to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Duane Watson, and I am also a professor in psychology and human development and also associate dean of EDI.
Thanks, Duane. Holly, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have multiple microphones. I never know which one is turned on. My name is Holly Megan Thompson. I'm a principal in Seattle, Washington, and I'm in my 11th year as an administrator. So I'm thinking about next steps in terms of getting my doctorate and have always had my eye on the Peabody School. So this came from an email and it sounded like it could help me currently because we're really struggling with our students who had schooling loss for the last year and a half. And then also just has always been an interest of mine. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Amanda.
Hi, sorry, I'll turn on my camera in just a few minutes. I'll be able to. I'm a sophomore undergraduate right now, studying cognitive studies and medicine, health, and society. And I'm really interested in getting involved in research and just learning about steps after undergraduate. So I know I'm a little probably on the younger side of people here, but I'm excited to just learn more.
Thank you for joining us, Amanda. Julia.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm using my phone. I use she, they pronouns. I'm actually the grad assistant for EDI. So I know a little bit about Meg's story, but really happy to learn more and really happy to be here with all of you today.
Thank you. Susan.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my camera's off. I'm in a mixed environment, but my name is Susan Holloway, and I am the Director of Health Integration and Social Determinants in the state of Delaware. I'm a first-year student in the Peabody School in the EDD program, Organizational Leadership and Learning in Organizations. And I'm always interested to hear more about what's happening in this space and how I can use it to further advance what I'm trying to do for the next 1, 3, and 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Susan. Yuki. Did I say that right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I got myself muted. Hello, everyone. My name is Yuki, and I came from the program of English language learners. I'm a graduate student. This is my first year in Peabody, and I come here because two of my friends, they told me that Saylor is really great professor, but I didn't have a chance to take her class. So I just come to learn something from her maybe.
Thank you so much. We're excited that you're here. Kastetkev, and I apologize if I said that wrong.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Khalid Stetkovich. I am in my first semester in the clinical mental health counseling track master's program. And I'm just trying to say yes to things that get brought up that I can show up to and learn more about, faculty, staff, program, and everything.
Thank you so much, Khalid. It's great to have you here. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Laura. So Laura, take it away.
So, well, yeah, thank you again for having us. I'm really excited about this. And I think Meg has lots of wisdom and things to share. So I'm excited to hear from her as well. But I guess to start us off, kind of my first question is, Meg, what your path has been as a professor and kind of what drew you to becoming a professor? If you want to share about that.
So I like one thing that is a little strange about my story is I feel like I learned how to be a professor after I got my job as a professor. So I didn't have a really clear idea of what being a professor would involve until I was doing it for a bit. But I had a very linear path to my job at Vanderbilt. So I did my undergraduate degree at UC Berkeley in California, and I was a psychology major. And as part of that, I decided to do an honors thesis, and my thesis mentor encouraged me to apply to graduate programs. And so I did. And then I ended up going to grad school at the University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. And my mentors encouraged me to apply for jobs. So I did. And then I ended up interviewing at a couple places, and I was hired by Vanderbilt. I'm pretty much straight out of my PhD program, which is pretty unusual for these days, but way back when, in the early part of the 2000s, it happened sometimes. Yeah.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, that's helpful context to hear about. And I guess something that I'm also wondering about, and I know you've shared a little bit about with me before, is kind of the even more background context of what you wanted to do. So like, what did you want to be when you grew up? And is this what you always wanted to do? I guess you kind of meant no.
No. So I was a bit of a weird kid. So when I was in elementary school, I decided I wanted to be a botanist. Because my stepmother was really interested in plants and horticulture, and I liked science topics. I don't think I really knew exactly what a botanist was, but I just knew it was a thing. I wanted to grow up and study plants. And then by the time I got to college, I had decided that I wanted to do genetics. But I was too afraid to take chemistry at Berkeley. So I had convinced myself that I wouldn't be successful. So I instead took a lot of classes in biology and anatomy. And that sort of got me on the path to majoring in psychology and eventually settling on the thing that I love to think about the most. So it ended up okay, right? So like I don't have really big regrets about that, but I do wish that somebody had stopped me and encouraged me to take the risk of trying a class that might seem a little daunting. I may well have ended up in a different space if I had done that.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I wish there were some things that I think could have helped me now that I wish I had just taken the risk and tried. So, you know, I at a lower stage in my career also agree with that. And I think, I don't know, recently I feel like I've become more bold, and you maybe have told me this with statistics. This is like very uncharacteristic of me. Like in undergrad, I wouldn't have even touched it, but I've become intrigued by some of the kind of analyses and things, and it's been cool to learn about. I'm trying to take that advice in stride. And I guess kind of with that, you had mentioned in your bio that you are a first-gen student, so I just wanted to hear more about like what your background is in and your feelings about being in this position and that kind of thing, and what that is like.
Yeah, so so I grew up in kind of a small town in California that was sort of on the rural side when I was a kid. It's not like that anymore. It's like it's a community where it's a commuter town, so people like live in it and like drive to San Francisco for jobs and things of that sort. But when I was young, it was small. And my mom was a bank teller and my father was a police officer. So neither of them sort of did the whole 4-year college thing. And to be honest, like school was like my safe space. So I really like poured my heart and soul into my academic pursuits to like buffer some of the other unpleasant things that were going on in my life. And that coping strategy actually ended off paying off well for me. And when I remember when I was applying for college, like I filled out, and this is probably going to sound wild, but like I remember sitting on the floor in my house and filling out the applications using like a pencil and a ballpoint pen, which like is not a thing people do anymore. My parents didn't really help me with the application, so I suspect that there were probably some mistakes in them, but it ended up okay. And I ended up applying to schools that my friends were applying to. So I chose places that they were going because I kind of thought that if they thought that there were good places to go, that it would also work out well for me. I chose Berkeley over other schools because that's where like the most people from my high school were going. So it wasn't like, I feel like I ended up where I am making some decisions based on not a lot of information. But it turned out okay, which is why I think like I now sort of encourage students to take some risks because you never know what's gonna fit. The transition to college was a little bit bumpy for me. So I had not ever been like independent like that. And it took me a little bit to figure out like where I fit. Berkeley's a very large school, so it's very easy to be there and feel quite invisible. So I struggled with that a little bit for the first year or two. I did eventually end up finding a community of folks in the context of a part-time job I had. So I worked a couple of jobs when I was in college. So one was at a campus bookstore, which was a wild and wonderful place to work. And the other was a pharmacy on Telegraph Avenue, which was also, it was quite the experience. I did that for a couple of years, and then I eventually ended up working in a university childcare center. So I had to work to pay for stuff, which meant I had to get really good at like structuring my time. I think that actually ends up being a thing that first gen students are really good at, like a superpower even, is that when you have these multiple responsibilities that you're having to juggle at the same time, you get really good at prioritizing some things over others. And I wish that somebody had stopped me along the way to, I don't know, just make me realize that I was doing something really hard just by managing to juggle all of those different responsibilities. And I can't remember what the question was, Laura.
That was great. I think it was just to get at like your background and hear more about that. And so, yeah.
I think one other thing is that it took me a really long time to feel comfortable in academic spaces, and I still struggle with that a little bit. So like I still, even as like a grown-up, will avoid certain like intellectual spaces because I feel like I don't fit, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't have like big enough, flashy enough ideas. And I think that that's a cost that first gen students often end up carrying with them way into life. I'm a little bit better at recognizing when that like voice pops in my head and telling it to just be quiet so I can like get on doing what I need to do. But that took some effort to manage.
Well, and I guess as a encouragement in that way, like you are giving a big fancy talk
That's true.
coming up. So and you invited me to come with you. And so I don't know. I think, yeah, it'll be good.
It'll definitely be more fun with you there.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for sharing all of that kind of background. I think that's really helpful and encouraging too, that like coming from a space where you didn't know kind of if you were gonna succeed, and you are a full professor now and have an established like research line, and that's really at least encouraging to me. And I guess I think another kind of question that I'm interested in hearing about is what about being a professor do you like, or what's your hope in kind of advising students or working with them?
My favorite part of being a professor is working with students. So I love to teach. So that was a big surprise for me too. So I would say that like getting comfortable in front of a classroom took many years because I felt like I was a bit of an imposter, like I didn't belong there being an authority on things. But I have way more fun with it now. I love it when students tell me that something that I've taught them has changed their mind about what they think they want to be or what they think they want to study. I feel grateful when students feel like they can come to me when they're struggling, because I try to not be super intimidating, because I feel like I could have used sort of more welcoming faces when I was an undergrad. So I try to do some of that as a faculty member now. I also have really enjoyed helping faculty and students make their research happen on campus. So I'm on an IRB board on campus, and I review studies and help researchers figure out what they need to do so that they can get the green light to start their science. And I've actually really enjoyed that because I feel like I can do some good in a really tangible way for some folks. So yeah, those are, and I love research too, but I feel like my heart is really in the teaching and mentoring space lately. And that hasn't always been mostly in that space. So I try to give myself some flexibility to change my mind about the set of things that are feeling most important to me as I go on this journey.
That's really awesome. I think what you said about trying to be a welcoming face, I think is very true among graduate students and undergrads, both in my experience as your student and also from hearing many conversations. Grad students love to go to Meg when they have kind of just something that either is related to research or want to kind of seek help. And I think that means a lot knowing that there's someone kind of looking out for us when it can feel like a space that's really kind of not always very supportive, or just knowing that I could go to someone if I needed to is really meaningful. And I think you also do a great job with teaching, with the like teacher of the year, or I don't remember what the name of the award was, but like, like obviously it fits you well. And I have never heard a student, like all of our lab people are like, I loved your class, and everyone says it. So I think whatever you're doing is great. I think I asked this question already. What are your favorite parts about your job? I guess another kind of piece is just, what kind of advice would you give students about entering the real world? Maybe some pieces about what they should ignore.
So I'm not sure I ever it's an interesting thing about being an academic is I feel like we have we're buffered from some of the stuff that happens in the real world. So for me, like that can make relationships with my extended family a little bit difficult because they don't 100% understand what I do. And in my family, I'm like the weird, like outcast member. Like I don't fit with the rest of them. So I think I like for graduate students or undergrads or just any student.
Whatever advice comes to you.
I think like one thing that I try to encourage folks to do is to make sure that they're taking care of their social and psychological and physical needs so that they can do the other things they want to do. So I think that like one sort of piece of advice I have is just to remember that like you come first in this adventure, and if you need to take time to nourish your body, your mind, and your soul to be functional, then you've got to do that, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to make meaningful contributions in other areas. And that can be a really hard thing for many of the students that I work with, because they're very high achieving and very perfectionistic, and they feel like every single thing they're doing is the most important thing ever. And I think that one thing that I hope that I have done for some of them is help them feel okay about stepping back to take care of themselves when they need to. And again, I want to come back to the taking a risk thing. So the whole reason that I ended up becoming a psychologist, like one piece of the story was my avoidance of chemistry, but the other part of it is that I took a psycholinguistics class in my sophomore year, and I had no idea what psycholinguistics was. Like it was just like a giant like word. I knew what linguistics was because that was like that was one of my like options for a major after I gave up on genetics. But I took the class, and my professor was this kind of like a weird dude, really brilliant. His name's Dan Slobin. He ended up being my thesis advisor. He was a little bit scary, but he loved talking about language in the mind and languages from all over the world, and morphology in Turkish. And these were all things that were sort of new concepts to me. I didn't even realize that one could like dedicate an entire career to analyzing morphology in a different language. That is not ultimately what I ended up studying, but it's the thing that hooked me. And if I hadn't taken that class, not knowing what I was getting myself into, I probably wouldn't have ended up where I am today.
Thank you for that advice. It's really good advice. I guess kind of related, and this is kind of the last question I had, and then we can maybe open it to student questions. Do you have any like advice on bad recommendations that you hear that we should not listen to?
Well, like one thing that some academics will sometimes tell you is that you have to work all the time to be successful as a researcher and a professor, and that is not true. You have to get really good at structuring your time, and you have to make some choices about how you're going to spend your time. But you don't have to work like 80-hour work weeks to make this kind of life possible. And that was true for me even before I was tenured and promoted and all that stuff. Like and this is probably far off for some of you, but like when I had kids, I made some decisions about making sure that I was taking care of them. And they were my priority for a while, especially when they were little. And it maybe like it slowed down my progress through the promotion hoops, but I don't regret that at all. Like so you have to take care of yourself and your tribe and do that first. Like that, I guess that's my big message for today.
Thanks for saying that. I think it is really refreshing to hear that. And I think before you've shared with me that like sometimes your best ideas will come to you on like a walk or like when you're kind of not really trying to find the idea. And I think that is kind of like helpful evidence of like, taking care of yourself is really important. And yeah, so thank you for that. And then I don't know if people want to ask questions. Hasina, were you going to say something?
Oh, and I think you got your first question down there. So Duane wants to know, could you tell us about a cool recent study you've done?
Yeah, so I have recently been really interested in whether children ask questions about words that they don't know. And that interest comes out of like historically, that feels like a weird word to use for myself, but for a long time, I studied how children learned words for things. In most of the studies, we give them information and we ask if they can use it. And we have many demonstrations that children can map labels onto objects, like they do that really well. But we know relatively little about how children learn meanings for more like complex or abstract things. And one way that they might get at these meanings is by asking questions. So, and together with Laura, we've been having all kinds of adventures trying to find out if children are more likely to ask questions for new words than words that they know, and they do. So that, Duane, is my most favorite cool finding of like the recent past. And Laura and I have been trying to find out if asking those questions actually benefits their learning. So we have some really nice demonstrations that they ask a lot of questions, but what we don't know is whether they can take responses to those questions and use them to learn the meanings of words. And we're trying to figure that out currently, and we don't have good answers for it yet, but that's like my most favorite thing that we've been working on lately.
And when you say children, what ages are you?
Oh, right. Thank you. And they're preschoolers. So my expertise is in preschool and like late infancy. So anybody under the age of 5 is sort of fair game for my research.
That's such an interesting like age group too. And because there's so much change
Yeah.
one year to the next. And so,
I mean, they are a wild population to work with. Like sometimes they will say things to us in studies. Like Laura was sharing with me earlier that one of our participants asked if she could be his mom during a like a
I
work.
did not know what to say. Yes, that did happen. I always get some fun responses, and they happen at the most random times.
Yeah,
that's great. Has COVID like shifted how you guys are doing research?
yeah. COVID, it's ruined a lot of things, but for those of us who work with preschoolers and infants and who study language development, it's made things pretty tricky. So I also study how babies understand references to absent things and whether they can keep track of their experiences with different people to figure out like who's asking for what. We had to stop doing that research because you can't really do those kinds of studies over Zoom, and it didn't feel safe or appropriate to have families bring their babies in for that type of study. Our preschool research is all online right now, and that is ending up being kind of challenging in a lot of ways. So we are anxious and ready to be able to start bringing children back into the lab for studies. And so we've started talking about ways to do that safely, but I think it's probably still a little bit off for us.
Yeah, do other people have questions about research or other kinds of things you want to know about Meg or me? I'm happy to answer things if you want to know about grad school.
Yeah, I've got a question. How do you go about searching for research opportunities at Vanderbilt?
That question for me or
Either. Either.
So what I like when I'm working with students and they're looking for faculty members to do research with, like one thing I suggest is to start by thinking about classes that you've had before and faculty that you've met in this context to see if like there's somebody who talked about something that was interesting to you, and you can start with that person. Faculty tend to be really excited and willing to talk about their research and other people's research. So I sometimes will have students come and ask me questions like that who aren't a good fit for my lab, but I try to help them find another place to be. Sometimes you can also look at the websites for the different departments, and there's like listings of faculty and the research projects that they're working on. So that can be another way to go about it. Some departments have lists or like spreadsheets that give you information about research opportunities in the department. So like if you pick out like a department or an area, oftentimes if you talk with like the director of graduate studies in the department for you, they might be able to help you get started on your search.
Thank you.
I think Meg covered a lot of the.
Well, and if you
Don't have
can go to brown bag or colloquium talks, because you sometimes will find out about research that folks are doing in that context that might be interesting.
Yeah, and that can be a good way to see what people are doing in real time or more recently than maybe sometimes like the topics listed on websites can be a little bit, especially the publications that people have, because it takes, especially in developmental psychology, it takes a while. So by the time the paper comes out, the study's been done for maybe a couple of years. But yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what is the first research experience that either of you guys ever had?
So I can talk about my the first time I heard about research was like, well, so going into undergrad, I had this whole idea in my head, like I want to be a professor, but I had no idea what that meant because I didn't know any professors. My family hadn't ever like known any professor, like except for the ones that maybe they had. But my family's not in like psychology or anything. And so my first experience was in undergrad when I had a professor that I really liked. The class was, I think, cognitive psychology, something like that. And I thought that she was really inspiring. I kind of just liked her as a person, which has been a part of my decision process. And honestly, I think it's a really valid way to make some decisions too. But I really liked kind of her perspective on teaching and also on research. And so I asked her, like, you know, is there any way for me to kind of get involved? And she said yes. She did, or she does visual memory research. So visual memory and forgetting. And I basically kind of continued to work in her lab through undergrad, but I actually had other experiences within that led me here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Is it Professor Maxey by any chance?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I had her last semester. She's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
great.
yeah. And so I actually went to Ohio State, so I was there with her, and then we both moved at the same time to Vanderbilt. So I've continued in collaborations with her as well. But
yeah, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Did you want to share, Meg, what your first experience was?
It's very boring, but I responded to like a little research assistance needed. It wasn't an email because we didn't have emails. It must have been a flyer or something like that. But I helped to code letters of recommendation for gendered descriptors and things of that sort for a linguist named Sue Irvin Tripp, who was also at Berkeley. So it was like me in the library highlighting things. So nothing at all related to what I do now. But after that, I ended up working with Professor Slovin on what would become my thesis project. And I also worked in another lab at Berkeley coding children's drawings, which was wild and also not related to anything I'm doing now. So I think it was just like a bunch of small experiences. I was most comfortable with the experiences that didn't involve a lot of interaction with other people, at least initially, and I maybe still a little bit like that. So I was very comfortable just like coding things on my own. I learned a lot though.
Yeah, I think with that, I also had it's tangentially related in a lot of ways, but not any like direct experience with the work I'm doing now. But like I did, I worked in a like clinical lab, and I realized that wasn't really for me. And I also worked in like a math cognition, like early math cognition lab. And that was probably the closest to language because there were also language studies going on, and I tried to sneak into those. But yeah, it's like for me, it wasn't like a direct path. I wasn't like, I'm going to study active word learning in kids in my sophomore year of undergrad. Didn't happen. Yeah, other questions?
I really loved hearing about your teaching, and just also like the idea of how important it is to make students feel comfortable in that space. And so I'd love to kind of hear some of the things that you do to help create that space.
Yeah, that's a great question. And people have asked me that question before, and I'm not sure, like I think that like part of the reason that students feel comfortable in my classes is because I'm a bit of a dork and not like I make mistakes all the time. And I don't do this on purpose, but like I'm teaching a language development class this semester, and on the first day of class, on the second slide I showed them, I had misspelled language. So I think that the fact that I did that and my response to it sort of like set the tone for the class not being scary. I also try to make it very clear to the students that I'm available for questions in office hours or after class. I'm super flexible about deadlines, and of course not everybody can do that when they teach. Like I'm fortunate that my classes are pretty small, so I'm able to make adjustments on deadlines for things pretty easily. I try to describe things in accessible ways. I use a lot of humor, and that is not intentional in that I'm like being a stand-up comic, but I'm pretty uncomfortable in front of groups of people. Like I still kind of carry a lot of that with me, and if I can get them to laugh, that helps with my anxiety. So I think that I probably end up doing that a little bit more than I should. And I don't know, like I think just not being afraid to like be the person, like the authentic person that you are in front of a class really helps. And I don't know, like I try to make it clear that I care, and I'm not faking that. I actually really do. So I don't know. It's such a hard question for me to answer, because like I don't have like experiences with folks not having welcoming classroom environments, because that was another thing that I did when I was an undergrad. I would go to the first day of class, and if the professor seemed scary, I'd drop it. So which it worked out fine, I think, but I probably like missed some rich learning experiences with that strategy. But I don't, have any of you had instructors that you think do a really great job making folks feel welcome, or a really not great job? Like, what are some of the things that you notice?
Just well, maybe while people are thinking too, I think you did a really good job of touching on some things that I think, at least in my experience, have made me feel more comfortable with you, in the sense of like even in my interview and deciding where to go to grad school, a lot of I felt like the training I would get would be kind of good at a lot of places, but what I wanted was something where I would have a good lasting relationship with the person I was working with for a while, because it is a long kind of journey. And I think one of the things that signaled that you were a good fit for me was that you laughed in my interview, which like no one else laughed, and I don't know why. Like I don't know why that was the thing, but I think you do a really good job, and maybe it just comes really naturally to you, like being an authentic kind of person. And I think that
it's probably because I have poor inhibition or something like that, though. I just kind of like, I feel like I'm always like bumbling through meetings and saying things out loud that I probably shouldn't, but I
But it's
mean,
great and we all love it. Sorry, did other people have things you thought of about a welcoming space?
It's been a while since I've been in school. I guess it's been, I think 11 years since I did my graduate work. And I think what I do remember, and then as I'm taking trainings and courses now, is like the stories that relate to the context that we're talking about, which is super helpful because I think my learning style is definitely, I need to be able to like visualize what's happening when we're talking about like either how students are acquiring their mathematical skills, or when we're talking about, you know, conceptual learning versus direct learning. And so I think the examples are super helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, and plus to your both of your point, I do also appreciate humor. I think that's how I often lead, particularly like with my staff, is especially now in a pandemic. Like you just have to laugh, otherwise you're just gonna cry as you're trying to, you know, raise little humans to be good humans. And so I think humor also is really important.
Yeah.
It's a strong I like what you said about making it feel a little more comfortable for yourself too. Like,
Yeah,
I do that too.
but I guess the thing that's tricky about that is that I don't know. So I'm talking at this Center for Teaching thing sometime next week, and they're like asking me questions about like these kinds of questions. Like I think because the people who are going are interested in like improving their teaching, and I don't like. I'm trying to like figure out a set of things that I can tell them about or advice that I can give them that is not like you need to go take a class on like stand-up comedy or something like that. Like there's got to be there has to be like a set of things that folks are doing, and I feel like because I'm like in the middle of teaching, like it's just hard for me to step back and figure out what those things are.
I think it's really an interest, like I don't know if you've seen like the Saturday Night Live sketches or other like
So
comics,
many.
like, you know, when they're in the classroom and like, we're going to be like really woke professor who studies like spoken word and does this thing. And like, but I mean, it's like maybe there is not this set like things. It is about being authentic and doing what makes like that you're being you, right? Like, because clearly in those sketches, they're just like following some kind of script of what it means to be woke or whatever. And people know that it's not real.
Yeah. And I think actually maybe that is making me, oh yes, they do. And I have a cat that likes to wear party hats. So I use my cat a lot in my lectures and in my life. I think that I figured out early on that like I wasn't going to be able to be like a canonical professor. Like I didn't fit in a lot of ways. Like I didn't like sound the same. I didn't used to look this old. Like I mean, I was like 25 or 26 when I started being a professor, so I looked like a student. And I didn't have access to like the same bits of vocabulary. Like I mispronounced some big words, and so I think that like after kind of trying to like match what I thought a professor was going to be like and having it like really not work for me, I just like have over the years become like more and more myself when I teach, and that might mean that eventually I'm going to become some like kooky, really like weird person, and students are going to be like, just don't go there. But I'm not at that point yet. So I guess we'll have to see how it goes.
I like that idea of like not trying to be what you think a professor or a teacher should be. I think like you can kind of tell when someone doesn't feel comfortable in that too. And so like, I think you're being authentic. Sorry.
And I think like one other thing that I've realized, it's especially because of the pandemic, is that like being the smartest person in the room isn't the most important thing. And sometimes the material that you are trying to teach students is also not the most important thing. So like I had a student in the fall, like last year or so, during what I call a crisis college. She showed up to class one day and she looked like she had like rolled out of bed, and she sits in the front row like she always does, but like she wasn't being responsive or anything like that. So I asked her at the end of class if she was okay, and she just like started crying, and like something had happened, and she told me that she came to class just because she felt safe there, because she wanted to be like in a space with other people. And I mean, that like made me cry. But then, you know, I think that I sort of had this realization that sometimes, like even college professors are creating spaces for their students to come and just be and learn stuff along the way, but it may not be like the most critical or the most important thing, that you teach them all the things that are on your list of things that you thought you were going to get through in that day. So I guess that's a COVID lesson. I'm not sure that I really appreciated that to the same extent before this past year that we've had.
I love that.
I have a question to be quite personal. I really appreciate that Professor Saylor told us that to take care of yourself is very important in the academic environment. And I'm sorry, I'm quite nervous. Some of my friends, we have discussion yesterday, and most of us feel that we have to be quick to do the things we want, because as a girl, if you grow up, you have to get married and you will have a baby, and the family will cost you a lot of time. So we have to be hurried to do the things we want and to learn the things we like. And that thought puts a lot of pressure on us. And especially in my home, my parents expect me to spend a lot of time with the family, with the future family, to take care of my husband and my children. So I also feel even more anxious than my friends that I have to learn more things nowadays. So I feel fantastic when Professor Saylor said you spend a lot of time to take care of your children, and you are happy to do that, and you didn't feel that taking care of the family stop you from pursuing your goal in the academic environment. So would you like to give me some comments about my situation? Thank you.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think like balancing one's personal goals with the expectations that a family or a community has. Like one thing that I do sometimes try to encourage folks to remember is that nobody is going to have to wake up and be you except for you. So even though you know, you might be getting feeling this pressure externally, like you are the individual that is going to need to navigate the choices that you make in your life and in your family. And I mean, I think that like for me at least, like the decisions I made about prioritizing my children and family when they were young did have some consequences for my academic, my trajectory as like an academic. And I probably ended up studying different things and asking different kinds of questions because of it. So it wasn't something that came without a cost. But I feel really comfortable in the choice I made because I don't want to give you the impression that it's really it has been really hard for me to do the parent thing and the professor thing at the same time, because there are days where it feels like I'm not doing any of my jobs well. But I think one thing that a more senior professor told me when I was first starting out, because they were nearing retirement, is that they didn't regret not writing another paper or not publishing another book. And as they were at the end of their career, they were telling me that the things that they appreciated most were, time that they were spending with their grandchild, and former students coming and telling them about things that had happened in their lives. And it was those kinds of interactions that ended up feeling like the most important thing. And I've tried to remember that as I'm making choices about how I spend my time as an academic. But I think I don't know, I wish I could give you better advice. I think one really tricky thing is that my family connections are not close. So I was able to shed some of their expectations because of that. I haven't had to balance their perception of me with what I am pursuing. And I can't, I imagine it's going to be tricky, but I also am confident that you are going to figure out a way to balance it. Because all of the different parts of it are going to be important and meaningful to you. And when you're faced with a mix of things like that, I think human beings tend to figure out how to make it work. It's one of our superpowers. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
And thank all of you guys for being here. This was such rich conversation. And so I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you again, Laura and Meg. And I don't know if you have your cat to share with us before we go.
I locked her out. I can show you a picture though.
Oh.
Yeah, you definitely have to use that next week. That's perfect.
Yeah, Halloween is her favorite season, so she gets all kinds of new costumes.
I love it. Thank you guys for being here, and have a great rest of your day. Okay, take care.
You.
Bye.